All right. Hope everybody had a good coffee break, and we would like to move on to the next speaker. It's Ian, and Peter already introduced him about the great book, Organizations Don't Tweet, People Do. And I find a nice one-liner in which I would like to introduce you, Ian. He's one of the few people in the world who can turn complex world of social networking into something that we can all understand. And he's the only man with a digital upgrade option for us all to download. So I would like to invite Ian, and we would like to download them all. So feel free to be here, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I always feel as if I should break into, I did it my way when I'm using a handheld microphone like this. Yeah, no, you really don't want me to do that. Yeah, Mark asked me to talk a bit about social media and the prospects for using it in the sort of work that I guess most of you do. And I'm a little bit wary of the phrase social media, particularly the media bit of it, because it's actually been taken over by marketing. The whole world of Facebook and Twitter being used by organizations is largely done by marketing departments. And the reason I called my book Organizations Don't Tweet, People Do is that I can't have a relationship with a marketing department. It was actually originally a tweet where I said that because I had all these companies who were doing effectively 140 character press releases in Twitter and then wanting to be my friend in Facebook or LinkedIn. And it just seemed completely the opposite of what to me was the point of these tools. So as I say, people tweet, not marketing departments. Because even if it is somebody within that marketing department, it is still someone who sits there in front of a computer, writes something, and presses send or save. And some of the best at doing this, as I will show you later, acknowledge that and are open about what they're doing. So a little bit of background as to how I got into this. It was a long time ago. It was 12 years ago, long before it became social media. I was working at the BBC, where I had been for a long time, but I ended up being burdened with the job title of Director of Knowledge Management, which I think meant, from their perspective, that I was going to go out and buy big knowledge management systems, knowledge repositories, places to store documents and taxonomies to try and find them again. But I took the view that rather than encouraging that world of writing 40-page documents that nobody ever reads, that get stored places you can never find them again, I wanted to encourage conversations. I wanted to help people in my big organization connect with each other. So what we started to do was deploy very basic tools, very cheap tools. We put in a bulletin board, which ended up with 25,000 users. We put in a blogging platform, and blogging was just beginning in those days, and we put in wikis and RSS feeds. And, made a small dent in the culture of that organization. But what it let me see was some of the challenges involved in expecting people really to start opening up and saying what they think in writing in these connected kind of platforms, and some of the challenges that are represented by that. And one of them was language. My boss, when I still had bosses who asked me to write what my job was in one-line sentences, I said that it was increasing the frequency and the quality of the conversations that get your job done, which I thought was quite work-focused and quite grown up, but I was told I couldn't use the word conversation because it wasn't businesslike. But I was reading a book at the time called The Clue Train Manifesto, which has just had its 10th anniversary edition published. And it was an attempt by some really smart guys to put their finger on what it was about the internet that was making a difference. And this particular sentence struck me as being the essence of what I was trying to do. I was trying to encourage globally distributed, near-instant, person-to-person conversations. And the different aspects of that, I think, are worth just considering. The fact that I can connect now with bloggers in Iran, in China, in North Africa, in all sorts of interesting and challenging places. I can get a direct personal connection with these people through these platforms. But equally, I can get connection with the person at the other end of the open plan office, who I've never actually managed to speak to, and I don't know what they do. You know, there are many silos within large organizations, even small organizations, which are really difficult to cross, which these tools help you to break down some of those barriers. The speed is becoming more and more apparent, and is certainly a challenge for many charged formally with communicating on behalf of organizations. And certainly my old business of broadcasting is increasingly challenged by the fact that Twitter and Facebook are spreading news faster than journalists can get there, and that the stories are beginning to emerge out of these tools rather than being controlled, if you like, through channels and conventional media. And that's got a whole raft of interesting issues and challenges. But the positive thing is that it's about relationships. It's about people connecting with other people. And the strength of those relationships, I think, is still misunderstood. You know, I have friends who I have known, online blogging friends, for 10 years, 12 years, who I know better than people I've worked with in an office for 12 years. People I know better than neighbours I've lived next to for 20 years. Because there's something about the connections that we foster, particularly with the tools like blogs, which I will talk about in a moment. We reveal things about ourselves, we understand things about ourselves that we don't tend to do in face-to-face conversation very often. And even things like Facebook, where up until now a lot of people are playing, a lot of people are using it very peripherally and for less serious things. I think people are beginning, you know, the use of Facebook is beginning to grow up. People are realizing what a powerful tool they have at their disposal. And it's about these connections between people. And just to sort of touch on, I'm sure some of you, or many of you, have probably got some engagement with these platforms, but just to touch on why they're interesting and a little bit about the tools. First thing is that I'm using my phone for the screen grabs. You know, 90% of my access to these platforms is done through my mobile phone when I'm on the move. And I find it funny when organizations talk about banning platforms like Facebook. And I normally come back and say, well, you know, you're not banning anything because most people access these tools through their mobile phones. An insurance company I was working for the other day there came back and said, no, we take the phones off them. Which I said, well, bugger working for you then. But, you know, I think there's an interesting issue around the accessibility, the ubiquity of these tools. We're connected to them all the time. The first screen grab is of my personal blog. Blogging is kind of the old school, slightly less sexy perhaps than some of the current platforms, but it's still, I would suggest, the most powerful. The process of blogging, which I will go into in more detail in a moment, allows people time to think about what they do and why they do it, and then express those thoughts, either out into the public or, equally powerfully, inside an organization. So my ultimate fantasy, if you like, is a whole organization where everybody blogs. Everybody thinks about why we're doing what we're doing, what works, what doesn't, writes about it. Other people then read that and reflect on it, add to it, disagree with it, whatever. But the potential for having really thoughtful, lively conversations about the stuff of making an organization work could hugely improve effectiveness. And then obviously, more commonly, if that then becomes visible to people outside the organization, it is a very strong influencing tool. So I'm talking to a big oil company at the moment who, like many, have paid agencies to do social for them, you know, to sort of tick the box, make it go away. And they got into some trouble with this recently. What they're beginning to realize is that the potential, for instance, for them, for their environment nerds, you know, they're passionate, committed people who really know and care about the environment, to become visible, to become connected, to become part of a network of other people out in the world who care about those issues, is huge. And very different from the conventional branding that we indulge in with the sort of perfect image of an organization, which I think less and less of us trust these days anyway. This is a very different way of connecting. The middle one is obviously Facebook. And you know, what's fascinating about Facebook is just the fact, A, that they've got 1 billion users. They've just passed 1 billion accounts, which is inconceivable, really. And for many people, it's their first, if not only, experience of these connected networked worlds. And a lot of what Facebook does is just allow you to see patterns, to see people you know, people who are like you, people who are interested in things that are similar to your own interests. It's a way of making visible what otherwise is very hidden. And it's also teaching people how to point to things, how to signify that something's interesting or worth going to look at. And I'll come back to that again in a moment. And then the last screen grab is of Twitter. And just talking to Manuel earlier about Twitter and just, well, what's the point of Twitter? And the first time I saw it 5-6 years ago, like many of you, I guess, the first time I saw it, I thought, I need this like a hole in the head. You know, more people telling me what they had for breakfast. But I now wouldn't do without it for a couple of reasons. The first one is I get better informed about more things that matter to me through Twitter than arguably any other platform. So I find out about things that I need to do something about, find out things that are opportunities, or find out things that are threats. And I do that by following really interesting, well-connected, smart people who filter the rubbish out of the web for me. So I get to more high-quality information much faster. And just to give you a sense of the scale and how you manage that, there are about 7,500 people or so follow me on Twitter. Now, I can't follow 7,500 people. That would just be far too much noise. I follow about 3,000 people because if I didn't, they couldn't direct message me. And I want people to be able to make direct connection with me. But I only pay attention to 100 people who I have in a list because I can cope with 100 people's worth of incoming information. But it's really high quality information. And the second reason for Twitter being useful is that it's a resource to me. So I was doing a conference remotely with a university in the States recently, and the software that they were using wasn't seeing the camera on my laptop. So I'm looking at the prospect of an audience of about 200 people being faced with blank screens. And I tried looking in the help files, tried getting hold of the help desk, couldn't see a solution, literally had 3 minutes to go before I was meant to start. And I put the question into Twitter. And within 30 seconds, I had 4 people answered and told me which setting to change on my computer, which I did and went on. I can't imagine another way I could do that. Now, they did that because I in some way had helped them in the past, or I had been interesting enough to them for them to follow me in the past. And that goes back to the thing about having breakfast, that if I just put out formal-sounding, business-focused stuff, people wouldn't really know where I'm coming from. They wouldn't know me. So the knack is to have a mix. Like this morning, I took a photograph outside here, which I put on Twitter. A, lets people know I'm in Amsterdam. B, just lets people see something of what I'm interested in, such that when I then post something more business-like, they've got some context within to judge whether I'm trustworthy or not.